What if everything you thought you knew about the birth of Jesus, the day, the season, and the familiar nativity scenes wasn't quite what you imagined? It's a story told for centuries, cemented in tradition. Yet when we take a deeper look into the historical and biblical evidence, the real timing of Christ's birth might surprise you. Was Jesus born in December as most Christmas celebrations suggest, or could the true date be far different from what the world has come to accept? This opening question challenges our assumptions, but as we dive into the evidence, we find that the 25th of December, celebrated as Jesus' birthday for almost 2,000 years, doesn't have solid biblical backing. In fact, there is a strong case to be made that Jesus' birth might not have taken place in the dead of winter at all. This fact alone sparks curiosity. Why, then, is December 25th the date we associate with the birth of Jesus? And if it's not December, then what is the true timeline for Jesus' arrival on earth? The first question you might ask is, how did the date of December 25th become the accepted birth date of Jesus? This can be traced back to early Christian history, when the church sought to adapt pagan festivals like the Roman Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, celebrated on the same date. In an effort to align the birth of Christ with pre-existing celebrations, December 25th was chosen to symbolize the arrival of the light of the world during the winter solstice. Secondly, why does it matter when Jesus was born? Understanding the actual time frame of his birth does more than just challenge traditions. It sheds light on deeper biblical prophecies, astronomical signs, and cultural context that are often overlooked. By examining these, we can uncover the historical reality of Jesus' life, which offers a richer understanding of his mission and significance. To truly understand when Jesus was born, we must first immerse ourselves in the historical and cultural context of first-century Judea. The world at that time was vastly different from the modern one we know today. The land of Israel was under Roman occupation, a situation that shaped the lives of its inhabitants in profound ways. The Romans, with their vast empire, imposed their laws and governance over the region, and yet the Jewish people retained their distinct religious identity, which was deeply rooted in their traditions and the sacred scriptures. The Roman Empire's rule over Judea was marked by political tensions. Herod the Great, the ruler of Judea at the time of Jesus' birth, was known for his paranoia and ruthless actions to maintain his power. His reign brought about significant changes in the region, including extensive building projects like the expansion of the Second Temple in Jerusalem. However, Herod's reign was also marred by cruelty and a constant fear of being overthrown. His political situation makes the timing of Jesus' birth even more intriguing, as we see the interplay between the local Jewish customs and the overarching power of Rome. Culturally, the Jewish people lived by a strict religious calendar based on the lunar months, and their festivals such as Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles were deeply embedded in their spiritual lives. These festivals weren't just about tradition, they were a way of marking time in accordance with God's instructions. In the midst of this, the timing of Jesus' birth becomes significant, as it may have coincided with one of these major Jewish festivals, further connecting his arrival to Jewish prophecy. Additionally, the Jewish people observed a complex system of priestly divisions, which helps to pinpoint more specifically when key events in the life of Jesus, including his birth, may have occurred. The priests were divided into courses or shifts that served in the temple, and this system provides clues about the time of year when certain events in the Gospels may have taken place. According to this system, it's possible that the birth of John the Baptist, Jesus' precursor, took place during the spring, which would help place the birth of Jesus several months later, perhaps in the fall, challenging the winter birth tradition. Thus, understanding the political, religious, and social dynamics of first-century Judea doesn't just enhance our knowledge of the time in which Jesus was born, but it also plays a crucial role in determining when his birth might have occurred, shedding new light on the story we think we know so well. One of the key historical elements that helps in determining the timing of Jesus' birth is the Roman census, which is mentioned in the Gospel of Luke. According to Luke 2:15, the census was decreed by Emperor Augustus and required all people to return to their ancestral towns to be registered. Joseph and Mary, as descendants of King David, traveled to Bethlehem for this purpose. The story highlights a significant logistical event, but it also holds critical clues for understanding when Jesus was born. The timing of this census is crucial because it reveals important details about the Roman system of taxation and governance. The Roman Empire conducted regular censuses for tax purposes, and such censuses were usually carried out in the autumn months, when the harvest had been collected. This was a time when people would have the resources to make long journeys to their ancestral towns. It's also important to note that the census was likely linked to a specific period of Roman rule, with historical records suggesting that Augustus ordered several censuses during his reign, including one that took place around 6 to 7 BCE. This places Jesus' birth sometime before this census took place. Moreover, the notion that Joseph and Mary would have traveled to Bethlehem during the winter, when the weather was harsh and travel difficult, seems less plausible. The journey would have been a challenging one, especially for a pregnant woman, and it is more likely that the census occurred in a more favorable season, possibly the fall, when conditions were milder. This timeline also fits with other historical markers, such as the reign of Herod the Great, which ended in 4 BCE. Thus, the Roman census not only provides a historical backdrop for the birth of Jesus, but it also points to a more likely window for his birth, one that aligns with a time of year that would make sense for such a journey, and one that places Jesus' birth in the years before Herod's death, further refining the time frame for his arrival. The historical figure of King Herod the Great plays a pivotal role in narrowing down the time frame for the birth of Jesus. According to the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus was born during the reign of Herod, who is famous for his brutal policies and for the biblical account of ordering the massacre of the innocents in an attempt to kill the newborn king of the Jews. Matthew 2:16-18. Herod's death, which is historically recorded as occurring in 4 BCE, sets an upper limit on the time frame of Jesus' birth. Scholars have debated the exact year of Jesus' birth, but the general consensus is that it must have occurred before Herod's death. This places Jesus' birth sometime between 6 BCE and 4 BCE. The exact year is significant, as it challenges the traditional AD 1 date that has long been associated with the birth of Christ. By cross-referencing historical records with biblical accounts, it becomes clear that Jesus was born several years before the commonly assumed year 1. Additionally, Herod's fear of a rival king, which led to the slaughter of Bethlehem's male children, further corroborates the timeline. This event likely occurred shortly after Jesus' birth, suggesting a birth date earlier in Herod's reign, possibly even a few years before his death, when he was still consolidating power and trying to eliminate potential threats to his throne. This historical detail is not only crucial for refining the date of Jesus' birth, but also provides important context for understanding the political climate of the time. The combination of Herod's reign and the massacre narrows down the window for Jesus' birth, pointing to a date somewhere between 6 and 4 BCE, a period that aligns with other historical markers, including the Roman census and priestly divisions, to give us a clearer picture of when Christ was truly born. Another fascinating element that helps to pinpoint the timing of Jesus' birth lies in the Jewish priestly divisions, which were organized into 24 courses or shifts, each serving in the temple in Jerusalem for a week twice a year. These courses were established in the Old Testament, 1 Chronicles 24, and by the time of Jesus, the priests would serve during specific periods, particularly during the major Jewish festivals like Passover and the Feast of Tabernacles. The timing of the priestly service becomes an essential tool for understanding the season in which Jesus might have been born. Zechariah, the father of John the Baptist, belonged to the priestly division of Abia, Luke 1:5, one of the 24 courses. Jewish historical texts, such as the Talmud, provide a detailed schedule of when each division would serve. According to the records, the division of Abi served in the temple during the 8th course, which corresponds to mid-June. Zechariah's service during this time means that his wife, Elizabeth, would have conceived John the Baptist shortly afterward, around late June or early July. Given that John the Baptist was about 6 months older than Jesus, Luke 1:36, we can estimate the timing of Jesus' birth by adding approximately 6 months to the date of John's conception. This would place Jesus' birth around late December to early January, based on the timing of Elizabeth's pregnancy. However, given the hardships of travel in winter, it seems far more plausible that Jesus was born during a more temperate season, likely in the fall. This theory aligns well with the agrarian society of the time, as the fall months would have been more conducive to travel and would coincide with the Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, a time of gathering and celebration that fits thematically with the nativity story. Thus, by analyzing the priestly divisions, the timing of John the Baptist's conception, and the seasonal context, we can form a more accurate understanding of the season in which Jesus was likely born, moving beyond the traditional December date. One of the most intriguing aspects of the biblical nativity story is the mysterious Star of Bethlehem, which guided the wise men to the birthplace of Jesus. This celestial phenomenon has captured the imagination of many throughout history, and while some interpret it as a divine sign, others look to astronomical phenomena for an explanation. The star is mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew 2:1-10, where it is described as a star that led the Magi to Jesus, eventually stopping over Bethlehem. The question remains, what exactly was this star, and could it provide any clues about the timing of Jesus' birth? One prominent theory is that the Star of Bethlehem was a planetary conjunction, an event where 2 or more planets appear very close together in the sky. Astronomers have suggested that such a conjunction could have occurred around the time of Jesus' birth. For example, in 7 BCE, there was a rare conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn in the constellation Pisces. This particular alignment would have been especially significant for the Magi, who were astrologers from the East and might have seen such an event as a powerful omen. Jupiter, often associated with kingship in ancient astrology, would have been interpreted as a sign of the birth of a great king. Another astronomical explanation suggests that the Star of Bethlehem could have been a comet or a supernova. Ancient records, particularly from China and Rome, describe sightings of comets around the time that could correspond to Jesus' birth, which may have been seen as a herald of significant events. However, these phenomena are more fleeting, and the star in Matthew's Gospel is described as a stationary object that guided the Magi, which seems to fit better with a planetary conjunction rather than a comet or supernova. The significance of the Star of Bethlehem goes beyond just being an astronomical event. It also ties into Jewish prophetic traditions. For instance, in the book of Numbers 24:17, the prophecy of Balaam mentions a star that will come out of Jacob, often interpreted as a messianic reference. This connection would have been meaningful to the Magi, who were likely familiar with Jewish prophecies and may have connected the celestial event to the birth of the Jewish Messiah. Thus, the astronomical evidence surrounding the Star of Bethlehem not only enhances the nativity story, but also offers a valuable clue to the timing of Jesus' birth. Whether it was a conjunction, a comet, or another celestial event, the star provides a fascinating link between the birth of Christ and the heavens, reinforcing the idea that Jesus' arrival was a momentous, world-changing event that had cosmic significance. Another layer of evidence that aids in determining the time of Jesus' birth lies in the Jewish festivals of the 1st century, which were deeply intertwined with the religious and cultural life of the people. These festivals, such as Passover, Pentecost, and the Feast of Tabernacles, followed the Jewish lunar calendar and held great significance in the life of every Jewish family. The timing of Jesus' birth can be linked to one of these festivals, as they were not only a reflection of Jewish history, and religious observance, but also of God's divine plan, as many scholars believe. The Feast of Tabernacles, also known as Sukkot, is one of the most intriguing festivals when it comes to dating the birth of Jesus. This festival, which takes place in the fall, typically occurs in September or October, and it commemorates the Israelites' journey through the wilderness after their exodus from Egypt. During this time, Jewish families would build temporary shelters, or sukkahs, to remember how their ancestors lived in tents during their desert wanderings. What makes this festival significant for understanding the timing of Jesus' birth is its thematic connection to God's presence among His people. The festival is marked by joyful celebration, and many Jews looked forward to the Messiah's coming during this time. In John 1:14, the Gospel writer famously states that the Word became flesh and made His dwelling among us, which some scholars interpret as a reference to the Feast of Tabernacles. The word dwelling in Greek, skanu, can be translated as tabernacling, suggesting that Jesus' birth could symbolically align with this festival. If this is the case, it would place the birth of Jesus in the fall, around the time of Sukkot. Furthermore, the timing of Jesus' birth could also relate to the Passover festival, another key event in Jewish tradition. Some scholars argue that the symbolism of Jesus as the Lamb of God, John 1:29, connects His birth with the Passover season, which celebrates the deliverance of the Israelites from slavery in Egypt. This could point to the idea that Jesus' arrival was closely tied to the Jewish calendar of redemptive events. By examining these festivals, we gain a deeper understanding of how Jesus' birth might have been timed in accordance with the Jewish liturgical year. The connection between Jesus' birth and these annual celebrations strengthens the view that His arrival fulfilled both the Jewish prophecies and God's ultimate plan for salvation. The specific timing of these festivals serves not only as a cultural marker, but also as a profound theological symbol in the unfolding story of Christ's life. As we piece together the historical, astronomical, and cultural evidence surrounding the birth of Jesus, we come to realize that His arrival on earth was not just a moment in time, but the beginning of a divine plan with profound significance for humanity. The exact date of His birth may remain uncertain, but one thing is clear: the timing of Jesus' birth was deeply intentional, woven into the fabric of both Jewish tradition and the wider world at that time. The birth of Jesus was not merely a historical event. It was the fulfillment of prophecies that had been foretold for centuries. His arrival at a specific time in history, when the Roman Empire had established peace throughout the Mediterranean world, when Jewish expectations for a Messiah were at their height, and when the signs in the heavens pointed to a new beginning, was no coincidence. Jesus was born in a world that was waiting for something or someone to change it, and He came as the fulfillment of that longing. This deeper understanding of the birth of Jesus helps us appreciate not only the historical accuracy of the nativity story, but also its theological significance. The connection to Jewish festivals like the Feast of Tabernacles and Passover demonstrates that Jesus' life was part of a divine narrative that stretched back to the Old Testament. His birth at a time that aligned with these festivals symbolized the arrival of the light of the world and the Lamb of God, whose life, death, and resurrection would provide the ultimate redemption for humanity. This wasn't just the birth of a child, it was the beginning of the fulfillment of God's promise to His people. What makes this story even more compelling is the way it resonates across time and cultures. No matter where we are in the world, or when we reflect on the birth of Jesus, His message of love, hope, and salvation transcends all boundaries. His arrival heralded the possibility of transformation, not just for the people of Judea or the Roman Empire, but for every person who would come to understand the significance of His life and teachings. This is why the story of Jesus' birth continues to inspire and impact millions, even today. As we conclude our exploration of the timing of Jesus' birth, it's clear that there is more to the nativity story than we may have initially thought. By considering the political, cultural, astronomical, and religious context in which He was born, we gain a fuller understanding of His arrival and the profound message it carried. His birth was no ordinary event. It was the arrival of the Messiah, destined to change the world. And while we may never know the exact day Jesus was born, we can celebrate the meaning of his birth every day of the year. The true significance of his arrival is not bound by a calendar date, but by the eternal impact his life had on humanity. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. If you found this exploration of Jesus' birth interesting and thought-provoking, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more insights into the deeper truths of history, faith, and spirituality. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. What are your reflections on the timing and significance of Jesus' birth? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below.